radar.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us on our continuing coverage on Hurricane Dorian. A couple of new things to let you know about. It is 8:15 p.m. Currently. I'm going to look over my shoulder here real quick because I want to make sure that we got clean audio. So let me know if you guys don't hear me clearly. That's been an ongoing issue with us. We try and fix this. We really do, because I know this stuff's important and people want to hear what we have to say. So if you don't hear me well, let me know, because I didn't hear it in my speakers, but I see the monitors, so hopefully it works. So anyway, of course, we're anticipating a landfall from Dorian probably sometime Monday night into Tuesday. A couple of things, big things have happened today. There's been some shifts in the path yet again, and the biggest update as of 8 p.m. Tonight is now Dorian very close to a Category 4 winds. Winds are now up to 125 miles an hour sustained, and we expect that this hurricane to get even stronger. Now, the picture you see over my shoulder, or at least the live camera, is in Fort Lauderdale. Just thought I'd show you that. Of course, it's business as usual there. A gorgeous night across South Florida. Nice breeze, no rain out there. Should turn out to be a really lovely evening for those guys. Weather is not expected to get worse in the state of Florida until really Sunday, but there's also been some indications that we could be in for this even some more changes, because what we want you guys to remember is that as we progress in time here, the National Hurricane Center gets a better fix on what's going on in the atmosphere, and also what's going on ahead of Dorian, behind Dorian, around Dorian, and across all the quadrants. So we're getting more information from computer models. The scenario is much different than it was just a few days ago. The ridge of high pressure that you've been hearing me and so many other people talking about is forecast to slow down, or at least encourage Dorian to slow down. And it already has. The winds are, it's moving west-northwest at 10, and that is a slower pace than what we saw the last couple of days, around 12 to 15 miles an hour. So moving slower, and that means that opens the door for a wider range of scenarios. We could see Dorian not take that turn towards the Florida coastline as quickly as once anticipated. And then that turn towards the north, that's also a new player in the scenario here over the last couple of days, could also be a different scenario. Hang on one second, you guys. Let me just go back here and do something. I'm sorry. Let me talk right here, because I know people are like, why are you away from the mic? So let me do this real quick. And okay, I think. Okay. Anyway, so a couple of scenarios could be different. So we're talking about maybe a storm that gets very close to the state of Florida and then turns north, or the current thinking, of course, that it moves over the state of Florida. I tell you all of this not to confuse you, agitate you, frustrate you, but to let you know that this is part of the process. This is how it goes when we have major landfalling hurricanes approaching the United States. The scenario can change quickly, and it can change often. And I'm not saying that we're not going to see an impact somewhere along Florida, but I'm not saying either that we could see other states impacted by Dorian. So you've got to continue to keep business as usual, keep continuing to make the preps. But we've been talking about Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Those states, there's an increased threat for you all as of this afternoon. So that doesn't mean you need to go in full-on panic mode, but that means that there is some discrepancies in what's going on with the modeling. And so, you know, I think I said this yesterday, that when you're trying to forecast these hurricanes, you know, the weather changes daily, right? So the weather that you had yesterday is not the weather that you got today or the weather that you're going to get tomorrow. The same thing holds true in the atmosphere. So yes, we can forecast in the future, and 3 days out, we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen. But with hurricanes, there's a lot of complexities involved. There's steering currents involved. The high pressures, the Bermuda high we're talking about, this upper level low that we're talking about over Cuba, steering currents, trajectories forward momentum. All of that goes into play when you're trying to find out what these hurricanes are going to do. So I've been doing this a long time, over 2 decades. So I tell you this because I don't want people to get frustrated. I've already seen it on social media. I see a lot of people conjecturing what's going to happen. You know, when you see this run, someone says, okay, it's going here. What you need to do is continue to stay focused and listen to the National Hurricane Center. They are the official governing agent that forecasts hurricanes. We parse that data back to you all. I don't sugarcoat it. No one else, hopefully other people don't, but I know some people get into some armchair meteorology. That is something that you should not be listening to. You should be listening to trained meteorologists who have expertise in forecasting hurricanes. So listen to that, and we will be the meteorologists that are doing their jobs correctly will be spitting back out the information that we're getting from the National Hurricane Center. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Let me show you what's going on. So what we saw today, again, I'm going to zoom in here because this really looks like a super well organized hurricane. We get what's called the stadium effect. That only happens in major hurricanes, and that's when we get what looks like a stadium, basically a stadium where there's the center of circulation, and then at the top here, these really high cloud tops, it fans out like a stadium, like a dome, and that's exactly what we've seen from some of the blow off of some of these major powerful hurricanes. Let me grab my pointer here so I can tell you what I'm showing you what I'm talking about. So right in here, I see. Well, actually, let me start here. So I'm going to point right. See how that ragged that eye was, and these last frames, it's really circular, concentric, well-defined. I mean, this is a well-fined machine right here, firing on all of the quadrants here. We've got a wraparound, intense convection here. We've got good outflow. I talked about that yesterday. Remember, that's that feathering effect that you see here. That's the blow off or the spin out of these these thunderstorms that are reaching out from the center of circulation, and the clouds are spanning out from the upper level wind pattern. So again, extremely well organized. More room for this thing to grow, and probably will. You know, it's forecast to grow to 140 miles an hour. It could be a 5 too. You can't rule that out. But I talked about this on Facebook. Whether we talk about a 4 or a category 5, the level of damage is not all that much different. We could be talking about a different type of storm surge. For sure, it would be more intense in a Cat 5, but if we're talking about a top-end Cat 4, we're still talking basically the same type of storm surge, basically the same level of inundation or flooding water. And then we've also got this core wind field of whether it's 140 or 150, it's going to create significant damage wherever it comes in. But I want you to know that there is still nuances in this forecast that have yet to be written, and we will not know how that plays out in not tomorrow, and maybe not even Sunday. It may even be Monday before we actually got to get a firm grip on this. And until we see that turn directly towards Florida, right now Dorian's moving towards the west-northwest, but see that turn more towards the west, and then that sharp turn towards the north. There's a lot of things that have to happen here for this system to hit Florida. Everything is still on the table. So the other thing that I wanted to point out as of 5 o'clock today was, again, that the cone or the margin of error, look how big it is now. It was centered all over the state of Florida all week, and it still is, but look at it now. It now extends out to a little bit of Alabama, part of Georgia, and part of South Carolina. So, and then all the way out here too, into the Atlantic Ocean, and not even affecting any land. And I will tell you, there are some models that take that scenario. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I want to let you know that if you start to see some more trending here, and at this stage in the game, we're looking at trends. We're looking at trends in the computer modeling. Sorry, I don't have my water with me, but I've been talking a lot today. So we're looking at these trends, how the modeling handles the hurricane every 6 hours or every 3 hours in some of the shorter range models, how the data is coming in from the National Hurricane Center and the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, how the modeling is being handled with the upper air soundings that we're getting from the National Weather Service and their balloons. So there's all these factors that go into this big pot, this big supercomputer that spits out all the information based on sea surface temperatures, winds, barometric pressure, humidity, vertical wind shear, you name it. There's a whole gamut of meteorological tools that go into these supercomputers to try and dictate what these storms are going to do. But it's hard to do that when a system like this is forecast to slow down, because that, again, opens that door for multiple scenarios. A scenario for it to miss the ridge and not move towards Florida, a scenario where it sits off the coast of Florida or off the coast of the southeastern U.S. for days, and completely impacts that area, or eventually moves and skirts up into the Carolinas. There's so many different variables here. So don't be surprised if you see another shift in the track tonight, because I do think we'll see another one based on what I'm seeing from the modeling. And again, I'm looking at trends, and we're trying to, what the computer modeling doesn't do, and where we still fall short in the science and the technology, is trying to interpret, or these models trying to interpolate the slow forward momentum. That's hard to do. The modeling doesn't handle it well. That's initially why we were seeing a wide variety in the models today. They're much more split today if you've been looking on them online. That's because they don't handle situations like this well. So put that in the back of your mind too, that we're still going to be talking about some of these nuances that still have yet to verify in the coming days. But based on the current path tonight at 8 o'clock or 8:26, this is what we're thinking is going to happen if the path continues to hold. So Dorian, again, slowing down and getting more time, unfortunately, to get stronger as it slows down, creating a huge problem for the northwestern Bahamas, which are currently under a hurricane warning. Those islands I'm really worried about, because it's going to come into those islands powerful. And then what it does after that is up for conjecture. We just don't know. But I wanted to show you this trend. So look at this. It takes it away from the Gulf. A lot of the models yesterday and most of this week, we're talking a Gulf Coast threat. The models today and a little bit of last night, we're trending back towards the east, where it be a Carolina storm again, or a Georgia storm or whatever. Again, it's too early to tell how this is going to play out, but the trend today is fairly significant shift in terms of where we would see this go long term, and that's why you got to continue to wait and wait and sit and wait and see how this plays out. Continue your preps, but there's a lot of scenarios that can still happen. And I know it looks ominous when you see a hurricane so close to Florida. It looks like it's coming, and I'm not saying it's not. Hear me say that. But what I am saying is that there are complexities here that are that have materialized with Dorian's slower forward movement, and the level of how that Bermuda high will pick up Dorian and move it towards Florida and eventually towards the north. All of that has yet to verify. So there's a lot that still has to happen between now and Tuesday. And remember, I know folks are hurricane weary already. I encourage people to take a step away from watching TV or listening to the radio if you're getting too hurricane weary, because remember, we're still talking about Monday and Tuesday. It's just Friday night, so we still have multiple days here, but you do have the gift of time if you're in this area to prepare. So here's a look at the model with the wind. And again, all of the state of Florida going to be feeling some type of effect of Dorian. I feel relatively confident in saying that will hold no matter what the scenario would be, because it's going to have a long arm. Even though it's a small hurricane in terms of size, these systems are still extend out Dorian extends out over 100 miles. So we'll see impacts, not sustained winds of hurricane force on the west side of the state, but we could see, of course, tropical storm gusts, and we're also going to see hurricane force gusts if it stays on the current path as is. We'll see Category 2 force winds all the way up into North Florida, so that would be a big scenario. That's also a relatively big change from the National Hurricane Center that we got today as well. Okay, so the estimated wind model. This is a couple of products. The Euro, that's the first one, GFS, and I've been talking about those a lot. And then and the third model is the NAM. So I've got this over Fort Pierce, Florida. I don't read that and say, okay, that's where it's going. This is just a guidance to show you as we get closer into Monday, you can start to see those winds ramping up to tropical storm strength. So definitely going to need to have everything done by Sunday, because we'll get into that tropical storm level, and crews are not allowed to be on the roads. City officials, statewide officials are not allowed to be on the roads when the winds are at that level. So you need to definitely make sure that you have all your preps done before we get there. In terms of the rain, I also wanted to, focus on that. Again, we've got to look at long-term, big picture, not just the wind that grabs all the headlines. It's also the freshwater flooding. And look at the models here, again, indicating a ton of rain for east and central Florida, up to a foot in some spots. This particular run is under a foot. Many of the models I've been looking at in terms of rain have been over a foot. So we'll be able to fine-tune this and tweak this as we get closer to what would be a landfall. But until then, know that we're going to see a bunch of rain in the state of Florida. Okay, so again, the steering currents, let me grab my little pointer, because this is a good tool. So we've been talking about this upper level low. That has initially what was driving Dorian out of Puerto Rico and kind of on this outer periphery. The main driver is this ridge of high pressure right here. So this is going to be the big story for us in the coming days, and how much this ridge builds in, how much it turns Dorian to the west or towards Florida, and then that turn towards the north. We got 2 turns we have to do. So a lot has to happen to get this into the U.S. And of course, none of us want it to go to the U.S. I know people make all these preps. They spend money. It's stressful. There's anxiety, and then there's a huge letdown when the storm doesn't come to your area, and you're like, oh, and then we get blamed, and the meteorologists get blamed for not forecasting it correctly. But I'm telling you, and I try and say this every year we go through this, that things change. It's the forecast change. It's not that we don't know what we're doing, and the atmosphere changes. Dorian, was not forecast to slow down, and it has slowed down. So those are nuances that have to go into that big computer model in forecasting that we have to change as the atmosphere changes. So here's a look at, again, the GFS and the Euro. Both of them, again, kind of skirting the east coast of Florida. This is the latest run. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it is a significant trend towards the east, away from Florida, since the last couple of days. So whether this happens, you guys, I can't tell you that with any certainty. I do look at trends this time when we're this stage in the game, when we're a couple of days away, 3 days away from a landfall. That's definitely what I'm looking at. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to try and extrapolate the best data that we can, from the National Hurricane Center and their data. They're constantly flying the recon hurricane hunters into the plains, into the storm rather, sorry. And we're constantly getting data from the drop sounds, and those helps us, look at wind pressure, barometric pressure, winds, sea surface temperatures also play a factor in this, in a storm, how warm it is. So all of that goes into how we try and regurgitate the information out to you. So I still want you to know, let me show you how far away it is from the U.S. I still want everyone in Florida to prepare. I've been talking for the last couple of days that I want folks in Georgia to be mindful and the Carolinas to be mindful, and you really need to be on your game now because of given the current scenario and that Dorian is forecast to slow down. I know it looks like it's headed straight for us and it's going to hit us in 2 days, but it's forecast to get even slower, and that would be catastrophic for the Bahamas. It's frustrating because they're going to get bad news, and you don't want that for anybody. So anyway, so it's about 600 miles away from Florida City, basically. So that hasn't changed really all that much today, but still anticipating that movement towards the west-northwest through tomorrow. And then really Sunday is going to be the pivotal day. If you don't want to watch the forecast, if you're sick of hearing about hurricanes, tune back in Sunday, because that's going to be the day that we'll get this turn or not. And once that happens, then we're going to really know how this is going to play out, because it's just a matter of physics after that. If it gets past north of your city, it can't turn back around and go back down towards the south. That just it's not how these hurricanes work. So once it starts getting in the higher latitudes, you can start checking off a little, like right now in this scenario, the Keys would be at a lower risk than, say, South Florida. South Florida, of course, still under a heightened risk. Central Florida under a heightened risk. North Florida, the Carolinas. But once it gets a little further north of some of these areas, you can start to check those off in terms of a direct impact. I'm not saying that they're out of the threat of severe weather or dangerous weather or hurricane force winds, but the threat of the eye, of the center of that storm coming over that city, becomes less of a threat because it's just geography. It's higher. It's in a higher latitude. So keep that in the back of your mind, and we'll continue to keep you guys updated. We'll get our full update at 11 p.m. I don't know if we'll be back on YouTube before then. I may do something on Twitter if I can find out some interesting stuff to let you guys know about. But until then, we'll at 11 or around 11, we'll be doing another update, trying to give you some more information. Hopefully, it's making sense, and we'll go from there. All right. That'll do it for now, you guys. It is 8:35? I hope, if you had questions, I'll go back and answer them. I want to thank you guys for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please make sure that you do, and click the bell so you can get notifications when we drop new content. We're really trying to populate the content right now. You may have noticed that. Also, check in with the app in our video layer. It's the play button that's in the app, because we're trying to really ramp that up too. So let me show you where it is if you don't know. So the play button right here, and I don't know if you can see it, but down at the bottom here, if you hit that, you can see all of our video content that we have. So we're really trying to populate that a lot. We're adding to it every hour or every couple of hours. We'll be continuing to do that for the duration. You can find fresh information there that's more fresh from my fast forecast, which we do in the morning. And then these lives, we're doing these too. We're going to be ramping these up too. All right, guys, I think that'll do it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you back here around